All right, y'all, this is video number 2. We're gonna tackle another set of these comments and questions that were left in the Jamboard. Again, the Jamboard link is in the video description below if you want to reference that. I color coded them to kind of group themes or concepts into one area. And today we're going to tackle the orange notes. And what I identified as similar in the orange notes, that it follows that category in step 4 of your accountability flowchart to really go into the perspectives pathway. So again, you can reference 34, 35 and step 4. We come across in the process of accountability that, hey, maybe there's difference in perspectives happening here, and we need to figure out what's needed to understand the recovery portion of our cycle of holistic and restorative accountability. Remember, the process is not linear. We are talking about a holistic process where accountability is requested, and after that dialogue, we then need to go into a process of recovering from that and then finding our way through repairing the relationship. So again, I'm your nature-based coach, Raynelle. You can find my contact information below. Also follow me on Instagram at Hike It Out Coaching, and I have more content there here on the YouTube channel. Subscribe to this to get some content that I'm releasing more often in 2024. And subscribe to my newsletter for some new offerings, first to know about what is going on. With that being said, also reminder of the disclaimer, I am coming from the perspective of a certified ICF coach. So any points where you find you need other support or other things come up, always recommend that you have other forms of people support, knowledge support, resources to go into. I may share some of those that you may find appealing or relevant for you to look more into today. All right, so let's dive into it. We are talking about going through the restorative accountability process, and we come to a place where perspectives are identified as needing some support or understanding around the differences in perspectives. So in the Jamboard, the orange notes, we have a comment and a question. So the comment, I'm going to read it as, where I feel like conflict is especially difficult to resolve is when folks come to spaces not acknowledging that there are different ways to speak and analyze information. All right, so I'm going to address that comment by offering how I'm interpreting that and maybe possible things to reflect on, try on as you tackle this situation for yourself. The next is a question that I'll address, and the question reads, what do you do when folks carry a bias in the way they judge you? They fragment your words in order to construe a negative narrative about you. So again, I'll offer that. And I feel like these are really ripe to have similar answers to them, that my responses to them could apply to both the comment and the question. Because again, we're talking about going through the pathway where we identify, hey, there's some differences in the room. How do we work with that and hold each other accountable to move through this? And really, it sounds like also our goal is to find restorative pathways, right? Restorative tools, approaches to that, things to think about, to get to a place where we are in better relationship with each other, where we can then focus our time and energy on the reason why we are in community together, why we're working at a place or towards a common mission. All right, let's talk about the first comment. Again, where I feel conflict is especially difficult to resolve is when folks come to spaces not acknowledging that there are different ways to speak and analyze information. So I'm interpreting that as really being a challenge in getting to resolve a resolution when there is an acknowledgement of the differences and how they're showing up in the room. I see this as a perspectives comment too, that really it feels like those different the different ways of speaking and processing and analyzing information are not given space to be seen and considered in the room when working on something, right? So this is a matter of like bringing inclusion, bringing awareness that there even are differences. Maybe there is a dominant way that people are speaking, and that's the assumption that that's the norm, that's the status quo. Also with when I hear analyze information, it's like being able to process, cognitively go through the information so that it leads to some sort of action after that. And so everybody has different ways of learning, right? And there are different considerations and actual ways that people process information. So how do we bring that into the space so that the acknowledgement that's needed can be there? And I want to remind folks of the tool that I offered in the beginning of the workshop before we even started talking about the term accountability, is that I set up the space in the Zoom call in the community to introduce that tool of building conscious relationship. And if you could find authentically a way to include the consciousness that there are different ways, maybe for you as an individual, that work for you, or there are certain behavioral tendencies that you want the community to be conscious of because it allows you to be more present. It allows you to really participate well within the group. So bringing in conscious relationship in ways that are saying like, well, when I ramble, here's what it means. Or when I'm nervous, I tend to do X, Y, and Z. I'm a shy person, so I don't speak up, but that doesn't mean that I'm not paying attention or giving you or thinking about what needs to be done. That's just how I present, how I show up. So letting other people know what your needs are and how it works for you in community. Same thing with if there are different ways of analyzing information, like awareness of, like for me particularly, I often have to remind people that I'm a visual learner. I can't auditorily take in all the information and get to a place that the rest of the folks seem to get to. I realized after a long time that I need to see the numbers. I need to see your name to remember your name. I can't just hear it and then see you again and remember that that's your name. It does help for me to see things first visually. If I see a bunch of numbers, if that's not put into context or graphs, it looks really just like a bunch of numbers to me, and I can't process that. So letting folks know what is important for you to be able to participate is what conscious relationship building is. And it can even be as simple as just like, well, hey, I just got out of like a really intense conversation. I'm just letting you know I'm like not fully present. So it may take me a while before, really stepping into this meeting. So I just want to let you know that is conscious relationship building. What do you call that? Like just on the spot. Right? And this also helps us understand each other by bringing that tool in and normalizing that way of working inclusively with each other. All right, let me know what you think about that. Conscious relationship building, if any of you have been trying that on since we had our workshop, and leave in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. All right, moving on to the second note, which is a question. So I'll reiterate the question. What do you do when folks carry a bias in the way they judge you? They fragment your words in order to construe a negative narrative about you. This one's big, like emotionally big, right? Like something is happening and you are experiencing something that, I actually consider a lot of these ways our biases or the things that within our perspective limit us to connect to each other. It can show up in a lot of ways that cause harm. And so I interpret this as, somebody is experiencing a bias that someone else has, and they're also acting on it by doing things like fragmenting words in order to construe a negative narrative about you. So I want to acknowledge, this is a tough situation. And for the person experiencing this, this is also where we pull back and recognize that we need recovery from this. And especially if it's sort of like ongoing and building up, that is something worth just pausing for yourself, maybe taking a step away and creating spaciousness around what you're experiencing. And again, these are moments that are challenging, they don't feel well, and they also give us information about what works and what doesn't work, and what in your toolkit you can pull out to really implement and try on so that you feel safe, so that you feel heard and seen. And again, in your own way, using this conscious relationship building tool may or may not work in this. So I'm not going to suggest that so much in a situation where you're experiencing someone acting on their biases towards you. But I do want to recognize that there are empowering ways to approach some of these things. And that's one of the first things that I want to offer. So rolling back, it's just like saying conscious relationship building is a practice, right? To use that, you really have to identify the right context, time, and space to introduce that or make people aware of something that you're requesting as a need, right? So first off, that. And what I want to focus on as far as answering this question is going into empowering yourself around this situation. We all carry biases, right? It's really that place where we begin to act on it, maybe consciously or unconsciously, that's risky, right? And it could create situations of harm and kind of snowball into really repetitive things, and you feel like there isn't the bridge being built in safety. So empowering language is one of the workshops that I offer because I would not only speak negatively about myself as kind of a norm, but realizing that when others spoke negatively or disempowered me through words, comments, reactions, tactics, I had to really understand the power dynamics behind that. And so when I talk about empowering language in the workshop, we go through different sort of categories of disempowering language and how that might show up as like, oh, I thought that was normal, but uncovering that it is actually very disempowering for us to say certain things, even though it's kind of normalized. So how do we reframe that? How do we see things in a more empowering way? When it comes to understanding bias in other folks, those are directly connected to one's perspective, right? And this is what brings us to that trail juncture in step 4. Oh, there are differences in perspectives here. You may be seeing me a certain way while I see myself and know myself in a different light. So, is this worth going through that process of recovery, whether that's together or separate and private, right? So that's one way to think about that too, is that this is why I've identified this question to be more relevant on that pathway of differences in perspectives being in the room. You know, we want to use some open-ended questions to really recover with that person creating or like acting on their bias, is really asking some of those open-ended questions towards them. Is like, you know, when you use the word and repeat exactly what words they're using to construe that negative narrative, when you use that word, can you tell me more about where that comes from, right? I hear that you kind of put this, like you fragmented, or you put some words into different pieces. I'm just trying to understand what's happening there, what's going on with that I'm observing, right? So really getting curious as a form of just opening up the space to dialogue through what you're experiencing. And again, I'm going to remind you, like, doing this in ways that you feel safe to do that, and that the other person is open to receiving those questions. And if you do ask the questions and they really, what you're asking them to do is be accountable to fragmenting your words and holding them accountable to like the negative narrative they're creating. Can you tell me more about those ways you describe me, right? And letting that be where you pause and listen and make that decision of where the recovery needs to happen. Is the spaciousness need to happen? Okay, thank you for sharing. I'm going to go off here and think about this, and I'll let you know if I want to follow up with you, right? Certain things like that can be done. But I do encourage the other sort of form of conscious relationship building guidelines, and something that I leave in the workbook, is those times where the urge to judge or make a statement of judgment comes in. Try to pause and replace that with a curious question. Like, get curious about some of these biases, some of these words that are being construed, some of these storylines that are coming from places you don't know where they're coming from, right? You can ask those questions as those forms of curiosity. And that's really one powerful way that I've seen the energy be redirected from going straight into conflict, like I don't believe that, I don't agree, to like, tell me more about what you mean there. And that leaves more open space for that person to take ownership of something that you're curious about and maybe that they have done. You know, another resource that helped me in the conversation language piece was getting some nonviolent communication practice or information. This is kind of like a national model of communicating that has been used in many different ways. There's centers and trainings all over the country, and they happen in almost every major city. It's very common. I'm sure some of you have done this. Some of what I recognize with that NVC model is that it does have limits. So there is a practitioner who wrote kind of the decolonized NVC workbook to address some of the limits that the original model has presented that don't really work with diverse communities, right? And why that might be. So take a look at that. In general, I do lean on like the empowering language workshop and ways to reframe things, because I think even knowing how to redirect disempowerment or like shift kind of disempowerment into empowerment makes such a profound outcome in what it feels like to speak differently. The other workshop that I think really spoke to attuning to how you receive information and what might be going on that can help you recognize where a pause needs to happen is a workshop on listening. 3 levels of listening is what I introduce as another workshop, and we go from, we go deeper with that workshop. It's like we could start with very straightforward active listening to understanding what it means to more deeply listen to what a person is sharing and how that's impacting you. And we go even further to go into practice with your intuition, and how do you listen to your intuition, what goes on there, and what's different about that level versus all the other ones that might help you through something that might end up as a conflict, right? And how do we sort of like prevent that road from being walked and go into a recovery and repair phase. All right, y'all, I think that's all I have for us today. There's a couple of books. Again, the other trainings outside of my company and inside of my company will be shared in the description below. This is a lot sometimes to take in, but I hope you can consider some of these avenues to try on to get to more restorative relationships. Thank you. I will see you on the next Q&A where we dive even deeper to some of the deeper needs that have come up in community. All right, take care.